Ladies and gentlemen, please extend a warm San Francisco welcome to the Academy Award-winning filmmaker and co-director of the movie you just saw, The Rescue, Mr. Jimmy Chin.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
You know, it's funny. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry. No, I was saying
we got to stay away from each other.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, we're going to cross purposes here. It's funny, Jimmy. I was having a conversation with a friend of mine the other day. We were talking about metaphysics or something, and it got kind of heated, and we kind of argued. And I said, "Well, do you believe in miracles?" And she said, "Absolutely not." And I said, "Well, you need to see this movie. It's called The Rescue. Astonishing story."
Yeah, it was a miracle we finished it. Yeah.
A miracle. Yeah. Well, expound on that. It's a miracle you finished it, you said.
No, I mean, you can ask another question, but it was kind of a miracle that we finished it. But.
Well, was it, you know, you could have approached this story on so many different levels, but you chose to focus. It's interesting watching it. We get a breather when we discover that the boys are still alive, but it's the aftermath that's so gobsmacking, at least to me. And you could have approached the story on so many different levels, but you chose to focus on the rescue. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for coming out to see the film and be here. This is our first weekend, and it's just incredible to see everybody here, so thank you. But yeah, I mean, this story, I guess, we were following as it was unfolding in real time. We weren't really thinking about making a film about it. We were just riveted by what was happening and just being parents, you know, feeling very empathetic to the families involved. But, you know, later on, when we were thinking about what our next film was going to be after Free Solo, this story just really, you know, grabbed us because of multiple reasons. But when we look at films or stories, you know, it's really important for us that there's, you know, subtext to it and something, ideas, I guess, and universal truths that can transcend even the subjects and the event itself. And this story had everything in it, and we also thought it was really timely because, you know, given how divided the world is right now and polarized, here was a story about people coming together from different countries and backgrounds and cultural and, you know, even religious beliefs that set aside their differences to really achieve the impossible. And it's also a story about, you know, at its heart, about moral courage. You know, I mean, the divers basically had everything to lose. And same with Dr. Harris. You know, he's an anesthesiologist. You know, if one of the kids died or if all of them died, he'd be known as the doctor that killed all these kids. And it was the same with the divers, because if you think about it, their plan on paper would be completely outrageous, and if nobody survived the rescue, I mean, they really had everything to lose, and they assumed that, you know, most of these kids weren't gonna make it, and yet they still went forward to do it because they couldn't leave the kids in there, and just that sort of moral courage it's a story and an idea that we felt was important to share.
Right, and they were all volunteers, is that right? I mean, nobody was paid to do?
Yeah, no, I mean, they're total volunteers. They're, you know, one's an electrician, one's a meteorologist, one's, you know, Rick's a retired fireman. It's just incredible what they did. And the generosity and selflessness was just, you know, to us, totally amazing.
As a filmmaker, this was different than your documentaries, Meru and Free Solo, in which you and your wife shot your own material and then guided those projects forward with your own perspectives. The Rescue was assembled from footage, right, shot by others, which is a different method of working. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think every film is different, and every film has its own challenges. This film, you know, was really, among other things, you know, we had to make it during a pandemic. So normally, you know, some of the most important aspects of the interviews is getting to know the subjects when you're not interviewing them, like having tea or going to their house or having dinner, between days of filming, and really building that trust and rapport. And we just didn't have that opportunity. I mean, they were in Thailand and Australia and the UK. So we shot all the interviews remotely via Zoom, and we had, you know, camera teams in each country that were local to shoot it. I was going to say
it has good quality, yeah, for Zoom.
Yeah. Yeah. Our our cameras on our phones are way better. 4K. No, but yeah, so that was a challenge. So we basically had to get to know them through the interviews, sure. Which took a really long time for them to really open up. We also, you know, didn't have any footage of the primary action because nobody was allowed to, no civilians were allowed to film in the cave. And it's pitch black and the water is completely muddy. So, you know, there was just nothing. I mean, there was global media attention, but it's basically all these, you know, correspondents standing outside the cave talking about it. So even though there was a ton of that footage, there was no footage of the principal action or the divers, because they were avoiding the cameras because they were assuming it was going to fail. And they didn't want they didn't want the world to, like, see them, you know, failing. But we did have a couple pieces that we knew existed, and the first thing we acquired was the footage from Dr. Harris, where he's anesthetizing the kids, which is totally wild. You know, you see the kid kind of like fade out, and a few other kind of random GoPro clips. But, you know, oftentimes in these films, there's a ton of footage and no story. We had like the opposite. We had like an amazing story and no footage. Then we heard that the Thai Navy SEALs might have some footage. There was a rumor that it existed. We negotiated with them for 2 years. Like, I don't know how many calls we made with them. And, you know, they're Thai Navy SEALs. They run covert operations. They don't publicize what they do. So they just said no to us in every way possible. And that was kind of the limitation of trying to do certain things during COVID. Like, it took, you know, Chai getting her second vaccination, flying to Thailand, doing a 2-week quarantine, literally going to the admiral of the Thai Navy SEALs' house, knocking on the door and, like, making her case. But, you know, doing all the cultural norms of, one of the things we learned is you never talk business on your first meeting in Thailand. So it was a lot of dinners, you know, the whole thing. She spent a week there and finally convinced them to give us the footage, but they wouldn't hand it over and they wouldn't upload it to a cloud. So they sent a couple Thai Navy SEALs with the hard drives in a briefcase.
Wow.
To like our studio where they were like inspecting security and stuff, because a lot of the footage had, you know, classified kind of information in it, including current operators, you know, which is why you see the blurred out faces. And, you know, we got the footage in mid-June, and we'd already picture locked June 1st. So we had to like break apart the movie.
Yeah.
And then recut, and that's why it was a miracle. Because if you understand timelines on post-production, getting the film out for this fall
that's a miracle too.
Was a miracle, yeah.
Yeah. Were you aware of the cave divers before you made this movie? I wasn't.
I mean, well, we read about, we read, when we started looking into it, we were reading some of the books that were coming out. But that was just, the details of the story just were, I mean, you couldn't write it,
No.
I mean, it was
Nobody
so
believed
astounding.
it.
And the other thing is like everybody watched it on television, followed it, but it was, kind of the euphoria of the kids being found kind of overshadowed what actually happened.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of lost.
There's some reenactments in this too. Could you talk about that? Because I think recently there was some like online brouhaha about the Anthony Bourdain documentary. People were in a tizzy because the actor that played Bourdain was not identified as an actor playing Bourdain.
No, this is voiceover.
Her voiceover, yeah, the voiceover, yeah.
So no, he.
But I mean, you have reenactments in here.
Yeah, I mean, it's all kind of pretty nuanced in terms of kind of like the standards within documentary filmmaking. I mean, we know Morgan Neville very well. He's an incredible filmmaker. He won an Oscar for 20 Feet from Stardom. And he's kind of a standard bearer of like ethics. So personally, I thought it was overblown because
I agree.
essentially they had an AI generated voice of Anthony Bourdain reading emails that he had written. So I mean,
what was a big deal?
Yeah, I mean,
I only brought that up as an example.
Yeah, but but the thing is, there's reenactments in tons of documentaries, many that have won Oscars. Like Man on Wire, like that whole thing.
Right.
It's just how much do you declare it, right? And so, that we had no problem doing reenactments because that's pretty normal because essentially, the way that you work on documentaries is there's always constraints, and the constraints are what push you kind of creatively. So in this case, if we wanted to show what happened in the rescue, it was either going to be an animation or a reenactment, and we chose to do reenactments. So we brought the cave divers together in the UK, way towards the end of the, last third of the filming process or production, and we asked them to just demonstrate exactly what they did in very specific situations because we'd already kind of written it out and scripted it, which was amazing because what you're seeing is accurate to the moment that they're demonstrating. So like if they're swimming between chamber 8 to chamber 9 and it was, we were like, because authenticity and accuracy for us is like really, really important. And it was really important to the divers as well. So, we just got to really see how they did it and just, the mindset they get into while they're diving, just all the details, like how did they move the tanks around and how do they swim and all of that stuff.
Oh yeah, and it all worked for the film. And it's funny, I told you earlier that it wasn't until maybe about 3/4 of the way into the movie that I was starting to think, oh wait a minute, how did the hell, who was filming this? So, whatever, I meant that as a compliment, as the way you used it, it was believable.
No, for sure. I mean, I think that was the goal, right? Like we wanted to bring people into the moment. As filmmakers, it's like a big deal to try to lock people into the film where, there's a suspension of disbelief and they're just there and there's nothing else happening and they're just in the film. And, it was a conscious decision to, we declare it at the end of the film, but, it's just, we wanted people to be in it.
Of course. Yeah.
And that was the other thing about Morgan's film is it wasn't declared ever.
Yeah.
So that's why, I don't know.
I'm sort of on the clock. So does anybody have any questions? Raise your hand, and I'm going to run the mic because we can. But I'm not really good at repeating questions. So
I can repeat them. Well, you're going to have to run up there.
Yeah. Hi, Jimmy. So my question is, when you were getting to know these divers, getting to know them through Zoom must have been tough. Could you tell that asking them questions about this experience really brought this pride that they describe at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I think the rescue really changed all of them. You know, as they say at the end of the film, like it really had an impact on everybody involved, not just the divers. You know, the Thai Navy SEALs, everybody involved, just because it went from an absolutely impossible situation to like 100% success on a completely outrageous idea that, I mean, just imagine if you are 100% convinced that something is not going to work and you're just desperate to try to make it happen and you pull it off. I mean, I think, you know, a lot of, and because of the teamwork and because of that people showed up and like, you know, were their best selves, essentially. And I think that's what, I think people have pride in what they did as individuals, but also pride in, you know, what, you know, there were thousands of people. And you saw the footage at the, you know, inside the cave, which was the Thai Navy SEAL footage of like hundreds of people handing the kids across. So, yeah, I think, yeah, they were really moved and changed.
Over here.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
My question is, when you got that additional footage, how much did that change the narrative of the film?
That's a great question. Well, it didn't really change the narrative of the film, thankfully. But it really just allowed us to, you know, show and illustrate all of these things that, you know, we could only dream of having. Like, the thing is, we thought it would be like 90 minutes of footage, and they handed over almost 90 hours. And it was in Thai, and it was totally disorganized. It was a shot of a cave, and we'd be like, which chamber is that? And then we were so desperate, we literally hired people off of Craigslist to translate. And then we realized that it wasn't just normal Thai, it was like all military slang. So it was just, you know, it was insane. But the footage was just so incredible, like the scene where they come out of the water after they found the kids, and then they're like, 13 alive, you know, and we're just like, are you kidding me? Like, or the shot of John, you know, leading the cheer with the kids, being like, say, you know, thank you, Thai Navy SEAL, you know, I mean, it's just these like amazing moments that you wouldn't be able to describe in an interview. But essentially, we were able to kind of lay it into our narrative. It just added, you know, is much more kind of a visual consistency through the rescue.
Okay, thank you. Hi, Jimmy.
Hi.
Two-part question, I suppose. Free soloing, cave diving, have you done either? And if not, which would you do second?
Well, I solo quite a bit, but just not at Alex's level, because you end up, you know, when you're in the mountains, you're soloing a lot in fifth class terrain, not to get technical, but, and I've never cave dived, although Rick keeps threatening to take me cave diving, him and Jason, and I know when I'm about to get sandbagged, so I have declined, but, well, we just really haven't had the opportunity. I would go with them, because obviously, if you're gonna go cave diving with somebody, Rick and John and Jason are the people you go with. And if you get screwed, you know who's gonna rescue you, so.
Jimmy,
Yeah.
you just got back from a climb, didn't you? You did?
Yeah, I'm a little sore. I had like 48 hours between screenings. So I drove to Yosemite on Tuesday night and climbed Half Dome with a friend of mine, and then drove back yesterday. Yeah, off the couch, it hurt, but I feel pretty good. I needed it.
Hi, Jimmy. I'm so nervous.
Oh, don't be.
I'm so happy to see. I mean, it's not really much of a question. I just wanted to tell you that you and your wife Chai are like such inspirations to me. I think you guys are so awesome. I tried getting tickets to come here, and it was like fully booked, so I may or may have not snuck in here.
Good work. I appreciate that. I'll make sure they don't arrest you.
Yeah. My parents are waiting downstairs.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you for coming out here and seeing it and following our work.
Jimmy, is it true that the Thai Navy SEALs who participate in the rescue have subsequently introduced cave diving as part of their training? I read that somewhere.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean, I think, you know, operations like the Thai Navy SEALs or any special forces, I think when they're faced with a particularly new challenge in which is not in their skill set, they have the means to introduce it. And there's probably, you know, definite use for it in some cases. It's probably applicable in ways that they clearly had not thought about, but I do believe it was introduced in more than just at the Thai Navy SEALs.
Another question?
That's great. Hello. I
Hi.
loved the movie. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I have a question about making documentary films, and that is one of the things that I love about them so much is that they provide a distinct sort of lens through which you see an experience, and then it also has a strong like beginning, middle, and an end. And I want to know how much of that you know and understand going into making a movie versus at the end, and then sort of similarly, how do you know when you're done with a movie? Because they're technically like infinite options that you could have to tell the story, and also you could find 90 hours of footage somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, another great question. I mean, we generally know that it's going to be a 3-act film or a story. We know that what the challenges are of each act. You know, like Act 2 needs to be strong enough to propel people to stay awake for Act 3. You know, so you build the stakes in Act 2, you kind of establish your baseline in Act 1, and you know, Act 3 is Act 3. So when you see a story and you're picking, you know, a story to make into a film, you immediately kind of have a general sense of like what Act 1, Act 2, Act 3 is going to be. You know, there's some more abstract structural narratives, you know, where it isn't linear, or it could be like tons of flashbacks, and you know that. But you always know that you don't do it for the sake of being creative. You do it for the sake if it moves the narrative forward. But those are editorial choices, and fortunately, we work with Bob Eisenhart, who cut Meru and Free Solo, and he's kind of like the grandmaster. And so much of it is also about what you choose not to include, as much as it is choosing what you do include. But it's a very painful process because there were multiple endings. And what we do is we try things, like we'll actually cut it and we'll see if it works, because you kind of can't always tell if something's going to work unless you actually try it. We have the luxury of doing that because we ask for 18 months of editing, which is way more than a lot of people ask for or get. But it's a long process of you know, just trimming it really, really tight. And this film was really hard because it was so fractured, right? There's so many different perspectives, people working in different areas. Many of the people we've shown the film to that were there were like, we had no idea these people were doing that, you know, and really the hardest part was piecing together what actually happened. And then, you know, it was really important for us to show multiple perspectives because it was about the divers, but we also wanted to present the fact that there is a totally different belief system in northern Thailand. And who's to say which one is real or right, you know? And that's an idea that we wanted to introduce, because we're always so caught up in this idea that our belief system is the only real belief system, and that's frankly not true. And as Alexis just said, maybe it was the bracelets, which, you know, who's to say it wasn't the monk that saved the kids? I mean, so it's just, we wanted to present these different perspectives, share the story of the Thai Navy SEALs, and just kind of give people the space to make their own decisions.
Well, and the film is a masterpiece of construction. We have time for one more question. We're way up at the top here, so the pressure's on to this gentleman here.
Jimmy, thanks for making this as a very moving film.
Thank you.
I'm curious if you sought out interviews with the children themselves or with their parents.
Yeah, so that was one of the constraints of the film, is that there was kind of a rights grab after the event happened. One studio acquired the life rights of the kids and the families. Another studio acquired the life rights of the divers and Dr. Harris. And normally we don't have to deal with that in nonfiction because it's journalism. So if you're writing an article about someone, you can't normally say, well, no other journalist can write about them. But it was tied up in the narrative Hollywood world. And in those cases, they can kind of do that. We didn't want to jeopardize the kids and the parents and the family's potential financial well-being by forcing the issue, because, you know, we understood what the potential impact could be. But, you know, like the title says, we were really focused on the rescue. And there's several different stories to tell within the story. And as a filmmaker, you do have to pick your kind of gaze on the story. So.
The movie is The Rescue, and if you liked it, please go on social media and tell people how wonderful it is. If you didn't, you can stay off social media for a couple of days to change your mind. But anyway, really thank Jimmy Chin for coming out.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, and one last thing. I mean, really, these documentaries live and die by word of mouth. So
that's right.
If you enjoyed it, please pass on the message. So thank you.
Thanks for coming out.